Before I begin, I'd like to give a big thanks to Electronic Arts and Nvidia for inviting me to this event and allowing me to capture RTX footage of Battlefield 5 on a 2080 Ti. Now, while this video is going to have plenty of no commentary gameplay, there's some important things I want to talk about first. The RTX footage of Battlefield 5 is in 1080p, not 4K. I rendered the video in 4K to better preserve the bitrate against YouTube's rather harsh compression. Similar to what CD Projekt Red did in rendering the 1080p Cyberpunk 2077 gameplay at 4K to better preserve the bitrate. Over the past few years, advancements in graphics have been fairly stagnant, with card manufacturers mainly aiming to deliver more performance for high-hertz displays or 4K HDR. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the diminishing returns Beethoven picture, and while there are at least a dozen things wrong with it, it led a lot of people to believe that we aren't going to go much further than from where we are today in terms of graphics. In actuality, of course, there are tons of improvements to be had outside of increased polygonal count, which today is pretty low on the graphical fidelity improvements list. Lighting, shadows, and surfaces being more reactive to the world around them is far more impactful for heightened graphical realism. Anyway, all of that is a really long-winded way of saying that NVIDIA RTX could be a revolutionary step forward in photorealistic graphics. It's something that hasn't really been done before in games, and certainly not as big of a push as this. What does RTX actually do? Well, it's simulated real-time ray tracing that gives you far more realistic shadows, lighting, and reflections. And when I say realistic, I mean accurate. It's simulated. Battlefield 5's world now appropriately reflects explosions, fire, soldiers, environments. All of that is reflected accurately on metal, glass, water, eyeballs, and other surfaces. Not just reflecting images either, like a bunch of mirrors, but also things like lighting on surfaces with less sheen. Regardless, this all goes a long way to providing a more tangible realism to the overall image. You don't need to spend the whole match staring at puddles for the difference to be appreciable. The details all add up. In the past, developers would need to cobble together a smoke and mirror trick that wouldn't look half as good as this. Water reflection in the Frostbite engine prior to RTX is a great example. Ray tracing should be one of the biggest leaps in graphic fidelity of the past decade, and something that's unique about it, unlike 4K HDR, you can take advantage of real-time ray tracing without a super fancy display. Even at 1080p, the improvement in realism is still meaningful. Here are some examples from the gameplay that I captured of real-time ray tracing with reflections. You can see the soldier and the entire room that he is in accurately reflected in the waxed floor, even the clouds and trees. And the reflection changes depending on the surface, like the reflection of this soldier in the wavy, choppy water is kinda how I would picture it to be on wavy, choppy water. I also really like the elevated train station being visible in the puddle. Does that mean that everybody should go out and buy an RTX card? No, it's not for everybody, especially yet. The technology is still in its infancy, and it's pricey, and what you're seeing in this video isn't close to its full potential. But releasing these expensive consumer cards is a necessary step to getting to its full potential, and eventually standardizing the technology and thus bringing down the price. RTX is primarily implemented in three ways: lighting, shadow, and reflections. Metro Exodus features RTX lighting, Battlefield 5 RTX reflections, and Shadow the Tomb Raider has RTX shadows. It's unclear whether these games could have more than one RTX feature, but I would assume so, at least with adjustments or possibly downgrades. It's important to keep in mind that not only is this a new technology in games, but that DICE only had a few weeks to work with implementing it into the build of Battlefield 5 that I played. And in the build that I played, ray tracing resolution was equal to the game's resolution of 1080p. So if I was playing in 1440p, the ray tracing would likewise be 1440p, and so on. Obviously, this can get very taxing for performance. DICE, and I'm sure other developers, are working on solutions for this with customizable settings where you can set the resolution of RTX independently of the game. For example, 4K game resolution, 1080p RTX resolution, along with other methods of optimization such as checkerboarding. But even without checkerboarding or lowering the resolution, there's going to be other optimizations that DICE is implementing which should drastically improve performance. Since DICE only had a few weeks to work with this tech, they didn't have much time to perfect its implementation, obviously. There's a lot of possibilities for this technology, and this is just one example, one early example of reflections in Battlefield 5. Just as soon as they update Battlefield 5 to improve the RTX features, I'll be making another video. But as someone that's really interested in visual fidelity, I'm really excited to see the improvements that RTX can make within the next few years. Graphics aside, I would love it if game audio could become a focus next. There's a lot of improvements that could be had there, and that's been very stagnant over the past couple of years. In any case, it's a really impressive technology. It's got a long ways to go, but the future looks bright. Anyway, I'm going to leave you guys with some more of my RTX gameplay, but also standard Battlefield 5 gameplay on a 1080 Ti at 1440p. I'll have a little slide that tells you when the normal Battlefield gameplay starts, but you can use it as a comparison, if you will, as to the overall feel of the graphics during normal gameplay, but also because this is a really pretty game even without RTX.
Good show! Objective Anton taken! No! We have lost Objective Dora! Be warned! Objective Emil has been lost! Objective Tesa is now ours. Soldiers, Objective Bertha has been lost. Well done, we have taken Objective Emil. Good! Objective Dora is ours now. Objective Anton has now been lost. Warning! We have lost Objective Emil. lost objective Dora.
Ladung bereit!
Objective Anton is lost.
Wo sind die verdammten Sanitäter?
Good job. Objective Anton taken. Objective Dora is now ours. We have lost objective Emil.
Deponiere Sprengladungen! Sprengladung bereit!
Attention, objective Dora is now lost. Objective Tesa is now ours. We've taken objective Anton. Hear this, objective Bertha has been lost. Objective Emil is now ours.
Erste Hilfe für dich!
We are losing objective Z.
Feindlicher Soldat gesichtet!
are losing objective Caesar.
Handgranate geworfen!
The enemy is taking objective Anton.
Voilà! Munition, Gerecht!